Leaking top insider stock trades every day until they stop us. Remember, 90% of insider trades are totally useless. We're only looking for those unusual and abnormal high signal insider trades that could help us outperform. Specifically, we're looking for trades that are unscheduled, so they're not for taxes, dividend reinvestment, employee stock purchases, etc. They're abnormal in some way. It could be unusual timing, the insider flipping from being a consistent buyer to a seller, or vice versa. The insider that has a history of success, so they previously bought the stock before the stock pops or sold before it dips. The size and quantity of the sale themselves, so if multiple insiders are buying or selling, or if they are making abnormally large buys or sells. And then the price action can be interesting as well if they're buying the dip, selling the rip, etc. Let's start by taking a look at today's insider trades. We can look at the most recent ones and we see only 20 purchases to 136 insider sales. So kind of continuing this lower number of insider purchases that we've had here over the last couple of weeks, and the steady decline continues. A slight uptick maybe here in terms of the percent of insider trades that are buys versus sales, but still well below the average, the median that we're looking for there. So continuing to see a little bit of bearishness maybe in the insider trading, and so we'll see how that plays out. Let's go take a look now at the insider trades. We will start with the purchases. As you know, I like to make the insider returns a little longer. We will look at since the most recent filing date, start with the purchases, filter or sort by transaction value, and let's go take a look at what we can see here. So as we can see, not a ton of insider trades, 32 total. Now you'll remember that we mentioned that there was 21 or 20 or something, because we do remove a lot of those. We're only looking for the potentially higher signal ones, so we do remove the dividend reinvestments or the ones that are too small or that kind of thing. The biggest one being 2.5 million, which isn't too bad, and we see a couple of people at American Battery, it looks like. So let's just start with that one and see what we can see what's going on here at American Battery Technology. If we look over here, it looks like there's a warrant coming in. So let's just go take a look at what's going on here to see if they're actually buying. It looks like they are buying some warrants down here with an exercise price of 99 cents. It looks like they were awarded something as well. They vested some common stock, it seems. Let's see what we have down here. The issuance of warrant pursuant to the reporting person's agreement. So I'm not 100% sure if these are, if they actually have to pay for these warrants or if it's just them receiving it. It looks like they might just be getting these warrants. A little bit hard to tell immediately what's going on there. I don't want to spend too much time looking into it here. So just, right off the bat there, not super interesting. We'd rather see them just buying common stock on the open market. Once it has something to do with the employment agreement. You also notice the warrants were down at 99 cents versus 40. So just not very interesting, I don't think. Moving on to the Cooper companies. This one is definitely interesting because we've seen insider buying at the end of last week as well. And it looks like we're getting even more insider buying here with a couple more executives buying the stock. We've got the president of Cooper Vision buying the stock for the first time, it appears. We've got the CEO buying the stock, who has a good track record, it looks like. We'll go take a look to see when he previously purchased the stock. Well, it looks like he also purchased Evolus here, where he's a director at, which was not particularly good timing. However, 6 months nor 3 months has passed. So this is a relatively recent purchase, which means it's not going to show up in the insider's returns on 3-month or 6-month timeframes. But this one appears, unless things turn around pretty quickly, that appears it's going to bring down their returns for sure. If we look at the only previous Cooper purchase was way back. I guess we don't need to look over there. We can look over here. Well, look, nailed the sale at the very top of Cooper, which you like to see. And then also nailed the bottom way back here on that purchase. So not a great sale here, though, the stock did go down over the next year, it looks like, after continuing to go up a little more. Overall, though, I think the CEO does a pretty good job of timing these sales, or these both sales and purchases, it appears. Plus, on top of that, we've got all these insiders buying the stock. If we look back over time, just look at the timing of the sales, look like they're okay. Maybe not quite as good back here. And we can see the only previous purchase was back here in the dip in 2020. So good timing. You also bought the dip down here, which was good timing. The insiders seem to nail these buys. This one's very interesting. A very high signal in my opinion. Standard Bio Tools, Hasden Partners. This is going to be just a 10% owner. Looks like they have a director's stake there. They've been buying the stock at these levels, it looks like. Kind of nailed the purchases here, at least a little bit. Did not nail. They don't seem to have a good track record to me. Doesn't make it super interesting. I just skip right over this one. Looks like they're the only ones buying too, as this purchase chart is the exact same as their own. When we hover over their name versus hover over the stock, they're the exact same. So looks like they're the only ones buying. Mike Maddox here at Busey. I believe we saw some other insider purchases at Busey looks like from the same guy. So you got the president here buying the stock for what appears to be the first time buying at least this stock. Looks like he bought CrossFirst Bank shares previously where he was a director. Looks like we don't have the returns for them. Not particularly great, or at least we don't have the returns chart. We do have his returns, which don't look particularly great. You know, went up a little bit, 7% over the next 3 months, and then turned around and went down. So it is interesting that he's the president. 2 purchases here back to back is kind of interesting. Doesn't look like there's any real notes of interest. Okay, so it does look like we've got some, there's a lot going on here. All sorts of different things. Looks like he's buying some Series B stock, bird stock there. So yeah, so this would be one you'd probably want to look into more. These I believe are just stock appreciation rights he already owned, which you do like to see. Let's see what the price of the stock is right now. Way up at 24, so already made quite a bit of money on these. Looks like they became exercisable already in March of this year, so he could exercise those if he wanted. Looks like these are just the other stocks that he owns, but it looks like they probably purchased, yeah, some Series B preferred stock specifically for his spouse and stepson. Adds, you know, again, it's much easier if we're just looking at purchasing just the common stock. Makes our lives much easier. Once you start to get into all these preferred stock, the perpetual, all this kind of stuff, there's probably some signal there you could dig through, but you know, it'd take us a little while to go through, so I don't want to do that on here. Another insider purchase, American Battery, which we already looked at. Looks like we've got a private placement here at Vubix, which normally private placements we just already exclude for reasons such as this. They were able to buy the stock at $2, and then the stock is probably, or at $1, I mean, and the stock is $2.59. So what are we supposed to do with that? I mean, good work if you can get it, I guess. What do we have here? A director at Safety Insurance Group who's now bought the stock twice here recently. Let's see if he ever purchased before. Had to have at some point. I mean, nailed the dip back here. This is his previous purchase, it looks like. Buying twice more here in larger size too than he bought down there. Obviously not a super long history. We only have one previous purchase. Well, one previous purchase that's far enough back that we have some insight into it. But no insider buying really selling since last year, full year ago. You know, a director, pretty sizable too. He's now doubled his holdings, I would venture to guess. Yeah, went from 4,000 to 8,000 holdings. A director, 2 purchases recently. Nailed the timing on the previous purchase. Again, definitely interesting. All right, anything else? Here's the other Cooper Company insider buying the stock. We've got a Devidia Bank Corp. This is one that we've seen for quite a while because the insiders just keep buying up the stock. So a recent IPO, so you'd want to kind of look into what's going on there in terms of the IPO, but insiders just buying up the shares left and right after the IPO makes it interesting. And then here we got a guy same last name as the company, which is always more interesting and makes them, you know, higher signal in my opinion, at least. There's not much research on that, but I believe it does. And looking historically, you know, did not in the slightest nail these purchases back here. Did nail this one, did nail these pretty well. So for the most part, pretty good purchases. However, we can tell by the lack of green lines that if we were to click into this, these are pretty small purchases. So a $50,000 purchase versus a lot of 6-figure purchases here, and even $1 million purchase back there. So notable because of the good returns, historically speaking, you know, has timed previous purchases pretty well, which is notable, and has, you know, a decent number of them have been made. But, you know, actually he wasn't even the one selling back here. So that makes it, or he wasn't the one buying at the top back here. So this makes it even more interesting. Not a super long history, but started buying back in 2023. Stock has just slowly and steadily creeped up since then. Average pretty good returns, 30% 1 year, 6 month, 21%, and 16% for the 3-month returns. Looks like they have another stock too that under a different ticker, GLQ versus GLO, that he's also purchased historically and done timed those pretty well too. So, or timed those very well. So this one, another interesting one. Same last name, history of crushing returns. I think that's more than enough to be high signal. Let's switch over to the sales, of which we have many more, and we'll switch this to bearish. Only want to see the insiders returns after they sold the stock. So we've got Southwest Gas Holdings selling off their full holding of Centuri Holdings, saying holdings a lot of times, but looks like they kind of did it during a public offering and have now sold it all off over the last few months while it chopped. Not a great history, or no history really, from Southwest Gas Holdings, so we don't know how well they do, but you know, could be notable that they fully sold out of their holdings of Centuri Holdings, and it was a very large $536 million sale, but you know, no history, not much for us to go on there. Looks like we've got another 10% owner selling out, not fully selling selling out, but selling a lot of another company. Again, no history of sales here. Let's see if anybody else is selling. Doesn't really look like anybody else is selling. Maybe one little sale here for 80K. So I don't know if there's much for us to do there. Got a big sale here, $83 million by the exec chairman at Ares Management. I think it's a 10b5-1 sale that's been turned on. I was going to say initially, I think, turning on a 10b5-1 sale could be notable, especially by a co-founder and executive chairman, but we can look back historically and timing has been miserable. So hasn't nailed any timing. I mean, maybe some very short-term timing here where the stock went down 15% or so over the next month, but long-term doesn't really look like much signal there. We got Paulson and Company, a very, very popular or famous hedge fund, selling Acadia National Management for $58 million. First sale in a long time, since back in 2021, the end of 2021, where the stock is just recently finally gotten back above what the price was there. So a well-timed sale there, a well-timed purchase beforehand. I'm sure Paulson and Company, I would think, would have previous other companies that they bought and sold before. So we can see historic returns for both buys and sells are pretty good for them. 17% on average, the stock goes up in the 6 month following purchases. 28% it goes down in the 6 month following purchases across all of the stocks that they've traded. It looks like they also recently bought Perpetua Resources. Pretty dang good timing there. So wish we would have caught that one back then, but we weren't making these videos yet, so maybe that'll let us off the hook. Another one just nailed the timing here at International Tower Hill Mine, up 160%, which is pretty fantastic. Looking here over some of the previous sales, like we mentioned, they nailed the sales. They nailed the sales over the next year or so. The stock went down to 17 from 25, so a pretty big dip there over the next 10 months. Obviously the stock has gone up since, and they're selling again, so this one I would consider a pretty high signal sale for sure. Got a couple insiders at Iron, which has gone flying, selling their stock options. It appears like the co-chief executive officers, first time ever selling the stock is notable. See if anybody else is selling here. Looks like nobody else is selling, so just these two co-chief executive officers. Let's see what they're doing here. Stock options, right to buy, they convert at 327. The stock is 26, so pretty good returns there. The stock also does expire at the end of the year, so they do have a little bit, or the stock options do, so they have a little bit of pressure here to start getting these stocks off of their hands. Let's see when they became exercisable. They don't tell us when they became exercisable, so that's not very helpful. We've always talked about, this stock's on a tear. 200%, 168% in the last 3 months, 240% in the last 6 months. Tons of momentum, super popular stock, super popular industry that they're in. Very tough to try to time these sales properly, but the insiders, are getting out here at least the current peak, which is notable, but no history from them. So, hard to give this too much signal, but I do think it's notable. What else do we have here? Palo Alto Networks, 10b5-1 sale. One other thing you'll notice is actually quite a few unscheduled sales up here at the top. Normally it's all 10b5-1s for the most part, so kind of notable that we're seeing so much non-10b5-1 insider selling, including by Vivek Ramaswamy, Roivant Sciences, large shareholders, selling $22 million of the stock. Looks like he's sold a few times before. We can see if anybody, let's just look at what he's sold before. Looks like he's been selling just recently, really. Not particularly good timing on the sales. Had a couple sales previously that he didn't time well, and then this year, since May, it looks like he's been selling the stock. Stock continues to go up. Don't think there's really much signal there. We've got probably a 10% owner would be my guess here at the Oncology Institute, selling $20 million of the stock. Unscheduled sale. Probably their first sale ever. Okay, not their first sale ever, but their first sale that's older than 6 months, I guess it would be the way to say there. The stock is up 10x in the last year, is kind of wild. So selling the rip of the 10x here. Obviously they didn't time these sales perfectly, but this is by far their biggest sale, as this was $5 million sale, $2 million sale, jumped it all the way up to $20 million sale. So they're just selling the rip here. Again, trying to time these sales of these super high momentum stocks is tough. No previous insider return history for these guys, so not much for us to really go off of. We can see if anybody else was selling though stock as well. $20.7 million in sales for these guys. So let's see. Maybe I'll load a little faster when we click into it. Must be a lot of people checking the site right now, slowing us down. So it looks like nobody else really sold. So yeah, just their $20 million sales. Looks like we maybe had one other direct insider here that sold as well. Yeah, another director here that sold. Timed his purchases pretty well. Timed these sales back here pretty well. made a much bigger sale here. Stock did go down, but yeah, not the most notable, not much history there, but just they are selling a pretty massive rip. We got the CEO here at Quantum Computing Corp selling the stock. By far, I believe her largest purchase, or his largest purchase, their largest purchase ever, I guess. 3 times larger, 2.5 times larger than their other ones. This stock also up even more, 2,500% in the last 2 years. Unscheduled sales, selling the rip. No insider history really here. I mean, the stock though is up another probably 2x basically since these previous sales, so they didn't time those particularly well. That one's going to be even harder to attempt to time. Look at a couple more here. We've got Johnson & Johnson, $10 million sales by one of the executive vice presidents. Do they have, looks like they sold previously in 2024, did not time that sale well. Did time the sale in August 2022 a little better, but not good enough to even look into any further. Boyd Gaming Corporation, exec chairman, now 2 sales at the same level, nailed this sale. Pretty good timing on this sale. Did not in the slightest nail that sale. Did not nail any of these sales. Another one to me just can move on. Sundar Pichai, probably going to be, even if it's not a 10b5-1 plan, I mean, very scheduled and consistent selling. You are very rarely, it looks like it was a 10b5-1 sale. Just missed the flag here. You're very rarely going to see executives at those big Mag 7 level companies making weird sales. They don't tend to do that. Lastly, let's look at Applied Digital here. We've got the CEO selling the stock. Timed this sale fantastically. Timed all of these buys quite well, at least in terms of long-term performance. Let's click in, see if we can get a little better insight into how the performance of the previous trades went for him. Get ourselves a bigger chart here. Not going to help us a ton just because we can't really zoom in right here. Did not time these very well. 2022 stock fell 75%, pretty massive. Bought again in the 2s, bought again in the higher 2s and 3s in 2023, and then the 3s, and then the stock kind of went up since then. So I think longer term, yeah, his buys are going to work out pretty well here. 33%. Sales, not as much history for the selling, obviously, but stock did fall from 9 to 6 after the last sale. So I would put this on. We've got the CEO selling. The stock's up 90% in the last 6 months. Previous sale worked out very well. Buying kind of hit or miss, a little better on the longer term. So not the most interesting in my opinion. You can find, or we did find, and you can find better ones than this, but a little bit of signal there, I think, for sure, because this insider does have a history of at least decent returns, and it's an unscheduled sale, $6 million, which is pretty sizable when you look across all these previous sales. You can see he sold 400,000, which is the most transacted. There's only one other one here at 391 that even comes close, which was a purchase, but this is the most transacted that he's done. So I think that is notable as well. So that, I think, is good for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow.